All right, recording has started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's session of Ask an Expert. This month we'll be talking about Platform Designer. Next slide, please. We are being recorded, just for your information. So the expert for this month will be Steve Srell, a colleague of mine. We've been on the team together. Steve has been employed with Intel, Intel slash Altera, okay, Altera slash Intel slash Altera, 19 years. Yes, that many that many different companies. Anyway, yes, he's been around for a while in the trading team. Definitely a valuable asset to the trading team. He does trainings on a wide variety of topics. He does have a focus in platform designer, so that's why he is going to be our expert this month for platform designer related issues. Not related issues, but platform designer, just platform designer in general. But he has taught classes on HTML design, Verilog VHDL, Quartus, time analyzer,
you name it, basically.
SOC class, exactly. Yeah. So pretty much any FPGA topic that we have training on, Steve has taught it. Next slide, please. So I will be your moderator. My name is also Steve Elzinga. So there are a couple ways to ask the questions. Like I said, this session is going to be recorded, and if having your voice on recorded on audio makes you a little bit nervous, feel free to type your question in the chat window. I will be monitoring the chat window, and I'll go ahead and relay the question to Steve. If you do want to use the audio, just go ahead and unmute your voice and go ahead and ask the question. And with that, I would ask as a favor, if you wouldn't mind keeping yourselves on mute until you have a question that you'd like to ask or comment or something like that. That way we can minimize any background noise. Next slide, please. All right, Steve. Yeah, go ahead and take over.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Yes, he's Steve E. I'm Steve S. That's how we usually distinguish each other. But welcome everybody to this month's Ask an Expert. Just a few ground rules. So any question that you might have about platform designer or embedded system design, or really anything about Quartus, if it's not specifically platform designer related, I can still probably answer it, or Steve and I can come up with an answer together if necessary. And again, of course, you can ask over the phone or directly in the chat. If it's some type of detailed design specific question, I will try to answer it based on what you're telling me, but obviously without seeing your design, sitting down with it, looking at code, maybe I may not be able to help with that. So those types of issues. So if you're able to turn it into something more general that I might be able to answer, then I will certainly try to. I don't want to take up too much time with each person because I'd like to get in as many questions as possible. So the more questions, the better. That's really what we want to get here. So please, any questions that you might have, anything that comes up, please feel free to ask at any time. If I am not able to help you out during the session, we'll try to get your contact information and maybe point you to a local FAE for further assistance, because we want to help you out and provide whatever service we can to get you going with your design. So with that, let's dive in a little bit. So I have a few slides. Again, the slides I have are really just kind of a guideline, things to talk around, things that I wanted to highlight or show. Really what I want to get is your questions. So please feel free to, again, interject over the phone, or Steve will let me know if there's questions in the chat. So while you're here, so we've been doing Ask an Expert sessions for a few years now, and we always get good folks coming in with lots of great questions, but you may have never attended one of these sessions before. So why are you here? So maybe you just started learning about Quartus, learning about Platform Designer to build your system design, and you have some questions. You really understand what's going on. Platform Designer is not a simple tool. You're in the process of creating a system design in the tool, and I'm seeing something I don't understand. Very understandable. I don't know how to do what I think I need to do, or you're just stuck. So yeah, Platform Designer has a lot going on, and it's not immediately obvious, so that's what we're here for. I'm interested in hearing about some of the new features available, so I will be talking about a couple of a few of the newest features that have come out in the past couple of years, just so you can get an idea of what capabilities are there that you might not be aware of. And you still call the tool QSys. So I always joke about this because people still call it QSys even though it hasn't been called QSys since like 2016. But the file extension for when you're working with Platform Designer still has a .qsys on it. So that might be why people still call it QSys, but it is Platform Designer. So there you go.
Steve, we do have a question there.
Oh,
I wanted to get to there before I got to the
awesome.
next slide. Yes. So speaking of embedded design, what is the future of Intel SoC FPGA Embedded Development Suite? It's a mouthful.
Ooh, that is a very good question that I don't really have an answer to because that's not really my area. I'm guessing that they're talking about the EDS itself.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. I haven't heard any recent updates on that. I know that we've kind of, it depends on what part of the EDS they're thinking about, but we've mostly been focusing, I think, more lately on having folks license with ARM, getting things from ARM, not specifically focusing on the EDS as much. I unfortunately don't have updates on that because I don't follow it too much. So, Steve, can you take a note of that and maybe
Yep. Let me do a little bit of research in the background
yeah, if you can find
while you
something
continue.
for me,
Yep. While we
that would be
continue on with the
great.
slides. Yes, I can do that.
Yeah. Not exactly my area, following the EDS these days. So Steve can find something out for me, I think. Were there any other questions, Steve?
Nope, just that one right now.
Okay, all right. So we'll keep going on, and hopefully we find some more info for you on that. But I also wanted to, before I get into just some demo and some new features, where to get access to resources. So we are still an Intel company, so you still go to intel.com, and the best place to get information about our tools is to go to the top and under the developers tab. So we've got resources and documentation and learn. So resources and documentation, of course, is going to take you to the documentation, and you want to jump to the section about Quartus. That gets you access to all the Quartus user guides and all other information about FPGA design in documentation form. If you click learn, you scroll down a little bit, you'll find Intel FPGA technical training, and we've got some direct links to the class schedule, access to our entire course catalog. You can also go to learning.intel.com, okay? And there you will be able to get direct access to our courses. So you register at intel.com, and you will be able to get direct access, register for any course that you'd like, either our over 300 e-learnings or an instructor-led training. We have lots of training available. We just had some platform designer training this past month. We will probably have more next month. We usually schedule that class usually about every month or every other month. So if you want training on Platform Designer, formal training on Platform Designer, chances are it will be coming up soon. The July schedule should be up relatively shortly. It's being developed right now. We'll get those training classes up soon. As far as documentation is concerned, like I said, your main source of documentation you're going to want to use are the Quartus Prime user guides. And for all of the links that I'm posting in the session today, Steve has those links. He's going to post those links in the chat so that people will be able to click on them so you can get quick access to the stuff that I'm talking about. But the user guides are really your best source of information. So there is a user guide for the Light and Standard edition of Quartus and a separate user guide for the Pro edition. There are a number of features that are Pro specific that are not available in Light and Standard, but Light and Standard for Platform Designer are basically the same. All right, so I wanted to just kick off, just in, for folks that are not entirely familiar with what is going on with Platform Designer, just a quick review really of what is Platform Designer, because maybe you don't know, maybe you've heard about it, maybe you want to start using it, so you want to know what it is, what the idea is. So the idea behind Platform Designer is that in a typical design, you are building an embedded system that looks something like this. Okay, you've got we call the parts of a system that are communicating with each other components. Okay, so you've got host components and you've got agent components. So host components are those components that send read or write requests. I want to write some data out to memory. I want to read something from a status register. So that could be a processor, it could be a state machine, it could be some other type of interface like a PCIe interface that is wanting to access data or send data to some hardware. And that hardware is the agent. The agents could be some IP, they could be an external memory, they could be an on-chip memory, anything that can be read or written to. Okay. So the thing about using Platform Designer is that most of the time when you need to build something like this is that you spend most of your time not working on these components themselves, but developing all of the stuff in the middle so that they can communicate with each other, so that the processor is able to send a read or write command to one of these agents. So you have to have address decoding logic. You have to have arbitration logic, so that if multiple hosts are to access a particular agent, who gets access? You might have different components that have different bus interfaces, different bus widths. All of these differences between the components need communication between each other. And so you end up spending most of your time building all of that stuff in the middle. And that's what takes the longest amount of time. It's the most tedious, because from design to design, a lot of this is going to still be the same. You might need to make some slight changes here or there, but most of it is still going to be the same between different designs. So that's where Platform Designer comes in. Instead of you working on all of this stuff in the middle, you focus on your value add components. You specify what components are in the system, how they are connected together, and then you click a button and it will generate this interconnect for you. Okay, it generates the interconnect as standard HDL code that is then brought into the compiler in Quartus, or you could still use a third-party compilation tool if you want to, and compiles the code and turns it into an FPGA design. So you get to focus on your value add blocks that make up the system instead of dealing with all of the stuff in the middle. Okay, it's really that simple. That's the whole idea behind Platform Designer. So when you're working with Platform Designer, it looks like this, and I'm gonna, I'll switch to the tool if there are questions about that, and do a little demo here and there. But really, you build up essentially just a list of the components in your system. Okay, you can add off-the-shelf components that we have. Excuse me, that we have in an IP catalog. So we provide lots of IP, many different types of IP, from very complex to very simple, just different like muxes and control logic, up to high-speed interfaces, the hard processor system in our SoC devices. Somebody asked about SoC earlier. All of this is accessible in the IP catalog, as well as the ability to include your own custom components or systems that you've created previously. You can take your own code, turn it into a component that can be added into Platform Designer and communicate with the rest of the system just like any of the off-the-shelf IP. And once you create a system, you can build a system of systems. So you can create hierarchical system designs where you add a previous system to a new system. For example, if you've developed a system that includes a NEOS processor and it's supporting peripheral components along with it, and you use that in multiple projects, you can package that up as its own subsystem and then bring that into any future projects going forward. So you don't have to redesign, redevelop the processor subsystem that you already created.
Hey, Steve,
So very flexible. Yes.
there's a question. Sorry for the interruption there. If the interconnect
No,
is
okay.
ARM AXI based, then also will it generate HDL for simulation?
So read the first part again.
So if the interconnect is ARM AXI based, then will it also generate HDL for simulation?
Okay, so the interconnect is not that is generated by Platform Designer is not currently AXI based. It is still Avalon based. So the interconnect that is generated is Avalon. Maybe what they mean is if the connections between the components is ARM based, will it still generate HDL? And the answer to that is yes. So one of the key things that you need to create a system in Platform Designer is the use of standard interfaces. So that's the way that the components connect up to each other. So we support a number of different standard interfaces, but the two main standard interfaces that are supported are Altera's own Avalon standard, which has been used forever, and ARM AXI, AXI 3 and AXI 4. So a component can support AXI 3 or AXI 4 and can connect to and communicate with any other components in the system via that interface. When the HDL is generated, the interconnect, meaning the stuff that I'm showing here on the slide, that is still gets generated as an Avalon-based interconnect. Okay, but the interface seen by the component itself. So if this processor was AXI based, like if it's the hard processor system, which does use AXI 3 or AXI 4 interfaces, then from its point of view, it will still be AXI, but the interconnect itself, the internals, are Avalon. Does that answer the question?
Almost there. You're almost at the finish line there. Could you talk a little bit about simulation? That if you want to simulate your design.
If you want to simulate your design.
Yeah, HDL, but specifically at the end there. So it's, the question again: if the interconnect is ARM-AXI based, will also generate HDL for simulation?
Oh, I didn't hear simulation.
Yeah.
Will it generate HDL for simulation? So you can, let's think about simulation for a second here. So with Platform Designer, and I don't have any slides on this, but let me actually switch over to the tool. So here we've got Platform Designer. I've got a system open here that we'll come back to. But when you generate, well, when you're working with Platform Designer, you can do a number of things with regards to simulation. And if the question, let me, what's the best way that I can describe this? So when you generate the system, there's a number of options for simulation. So this is for folks who may not be entirely familiar with how you can do simulation with Platform Designer. You can choose a simulation option here, which will allow you to simulate the entire system design. Basically, it will allow you to, it will generate scripts and use simulation models for simulating the entire system design. You can choose which which simulation tool you use, and it will generate scripts for that. So I guess the short answer to the question is that yes, of course, you can simulate. If you are using AXI interfaces, you can certainly simulate the resulting design. A related question might be is if there are BFMs or bus functional models for AXI interfaces. And a BFM, which I will bring up here, okay, we do have BFM. So a BFM, and I will open up one of these just as an example. So let's take a look at this. Here's an AXI 4 BFM. So a BFM, or bus functional model, is a component specifically used for simulation. The idea of a BFM is that you can access the BFM directly from your test bench in a simulation tool. So there is an API, get rid of that, there is an API that is provided for the BFM so that when you're writing your test bench to simulate your design, you can tell the BFM to do certain things. So for example, if we're accessing an AXI4 master BFM, like shown here, we could tell the BFM, send a read command to this component, and then when you get a response back, tell me what data came back so I can verify that the response was correct. So a BFM kind of acts like a placeholder for a component in your system to allow you to test and simulate the functionality of other components in the system. And as you can see, we have a whole suite of BFMs for Avalon and AXI. So again, the short answer is yes. To the question, the original question is yes. You can simulate AXI4 when you add components that use AXI interfaces to a platform designer system. Now, did I answer the question, or is there more to it? Any follow-up on that?
You answered it for me. let's see if there's a follow-up later on. Okay, yeah, he says it's good.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, one other side note, while we're talking about simulation, there is this other option called Generate Test Bench System that I don't think a lot of people know about. But Generate Test Bench System, the idea behind this is that it takes your existing system design, and depending on how it's built, it creates a special test bench system where it automatically can put in BFMs in your design. Okay, so there's two options here for this. Standard BFMs for standard platform designer interfaces, simple BFMs for clocks and resets. So what the standard option will do is you can leave certain interfaces unconnected. And if you leave those interfaces unconnected, it will automatically create a new test bench system that creates and connects BFMs that work directly with those interfaces. So if you leave a subordinate interface disconnected, it will create a BFM, a master or manager BFM, to communicate with that subordinate. So it'll automatically add those in so you don't have to do it yourself manually. There's also a simple option here which will only do this for clock interfaces, so clock and reset interfaces. So you can control clocks and resets from your test bench using the API. The rest of the design would still be actual components, but the clocks and resets, BFMs, would be used instead. So lots of simulation options available in Platform Designer. I do have an online training all about this as well, so you can check that out. Any other questions before I dive back in, Steve?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, all right. So that's a good one. Simulation is one of those things that we don't talk about too often with Platform Designer, or I don't get a chance to talk about it too often with Platform Designer, but obviously very, very useful and required, especially for larger system designs. So as I was saying, and I showed you in a moment ago, it's basically a list of components. You add the components, you connect them together, and then you click a button and it will generate the HDL code. So the HDL that gets generated is a combination of the HDL that describes this custom interconnect along with the HDL that makes up the functionality of each of the components. So that's really what Platform Designer does in a nutshell. It'll makes it much easier to build up these large system designs just by adding the components you need and connecting them together. So the interconnect architecture, just, oh, I should have forgot I had this slide in here. So this actually goes back to what I was just talking about. So the interconnect itself is Avalon based, okay? So internal to the interconnect that gets generated, we use Avalon streaming, which is a simple protocol for streaming packetized data. So all of the data from one side or the other of the system gets turned into packets, and then the streaming network routes the packets to the appropriate destination. There's a separate streaming network generated for commands and a separate network generated for responses coming back. So that way they do not have to fight for control for traffic. There's no, there's no congestion there between commands and responses. So you've got hosts or managers. These are the components I was talking about that issue read or write commands. And those can, as I mentioned, use standard Avalon or be using AXI3 or AXI4. And then those commands get converted into a packetized format, which then is streamed through the interconnect to arrive and converted back to Avalon or AXI for use by the destination component. And then on the agent or subordinate side, it will respond back with data on a read, or there might be a response even for a write to indicate that the response that the write was completed. So this in the middle is what Platform Designer builds up. It leaves your components and their design the way that they are. It's the way that they communicate with each other is automatically built for you, and that includes a mix of Avalon and AXI. You don't have to use all Avalon. You don't have to use all AXI. They can communicate with each other. So any host and or manager interface can communicate with any agent or subordinate interface. Now, there are some caveats to that about the use of certain signals. So if you're familiar with AXI, there are many, many, many signals that make up the AXI standard. And Avalon is a much simpler standard interface. So when there are signals that are used or not used on one side or the other, there different logic or different communication, different logic needs to be inserted to adjust for that. And the Platform Designer user guide actually goes into great detail on all of those circumstances, if something is on one side or not on the other side, what you get. But in general, the whole point is that you don't have to worry about those details. Platform Designer builds the interconnect so everybody can communicate with everybody else. Any questions or anything coming in, Steve?
Nope. We're good
Okay.
so far.
All right, folks. Yeah, please feel free to ask your questions. Anything that you have.
Yeah,
so,
I do have a question since we're on interfaces.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Anafon. Yeah.
Hi.
So, is it since we're talking about interfaces, specifically, we use the Avalon interface. Is it safe to export the interface to an external chip, to a chip? Say you have another FPGA. You have your main FPGA, and you have another FPGA, and you have a register space in the secondary FPGA. You want to be able to access those registers using like Avalon. Is that supported, or is there a better interface than the Avalon interface for that kind of feature?
Well, the first part of your question is it supported? Absolutely. So any interface. So let me go back to the tool itself here. Any interface can be exported. Have you used Platform Designer before?
Yes.
Okay. So any interface can be exported. So you can see here I've got a mix of all sorts of different interfaces in this design. It's mostly an AXI design here, but any interface can be exported by just double clicking in the export column and you give it a name. And that includes Avalon or AXI. And if you go to the instantiation template here, it will show you a listing of all of those interfaces that have been exported. So these are all the interfaces and individual signals that have been exported from my design. So this particular design is for an external memory interface. So you can see the individual signals that are exported. Most of these are going to get connected directly to I/O pins because it's a memory interface. So you've got the standard memory interface signals. So these will connect to I/O pins. But you can, so going back to your question, you could export any Avalon or AXI interface and it will show up here so that you can either instantiate the system in something else in your Quartus project or connect directly to I/O pins and say connect to another FPGA device like what you were talking about. So yeah, so the short answer is yes. Was there more to it?
Maybe offline.
Okay.
Later.
Did that make sense, or was there something else you wanted to bring up now?
It did. That was good for now.
Cool. Any other questions, Steve, in the chat or anybody else?
Yeah, nothing in the chat right now.
Okay. All right. So, like I was saying, so the interconnect is really made up of these 4 parts. We already talked about standard interfaces, and I talked a little bit about the interconnect and the separate command and response networks. So I did mention also that everything gets encapsulated into a packet. So the packet format makes it much more flexible. So going forward in the future, if we want to support more types of interfaces, more types of communication channels, we can adjust the packet format, and all you would need to do is regenerate your system and it would work correctly. So since your components are basically isolated from the interconnect, it makes it much easier for us to make improvements going forward in the interconnect to further improve your design, improve the interconnect with future versions of the software. And then the 4th part of the interconnect is what is actually in the interconnect itself to make it work. There's a number of embedded components that make all of this possible. The main thing that makes up the interconnect is really simple mux and demux logic, multiplexer and demultiplexer logic. And this is used for routing those packets back and forth between the hosts and the agents. So you can visualize and see the flow as well as the other components in the interconnect with the interconnect visualization available when you select Show System with Platform Designer Interconnect. So you get this new view of the system, and there are tabs for looking at the command or response network. Your system might also have multiple, I call them mini interconnects. I don't know if they're really officially called mini interconnects, but your system may be made up of multiple interconnects. And this is because if you have a host that communicates with certain components, and then you have another host maybe is communicating with other components, then and is not directly connected, then the tool can optimize the way that the interconnect is built to make these multiple mini interconnects. And so the visualization tool here allows you to select which one of these you want to take a look at. But when you're looking at one of these interconnects, like I said, you can see the mux or demux logic depending on whether it's command or response. So as you can see, a demux is used to route packets to the appropriate agent in the system. If there were multiple hosts accessing the same agents, there would be additional multiplexing logic for arbitration to indicate which of those hosts gets access to a particular agent. Okay, that is not shown in this particular screenshot. But besides the mux and demux logic, you see other components closer to the hosts and the agents. So you'll notice that there are translator components. The translator components are what translates the standard interfaces, the Avalon or AXI I was talking about earlier, and turns those commands and responses into packets that are then streamed through the interconnect. Okay. So again, it's all done behind the scenes, but you can see all this in this part of the tool. This tool also does allow you to add pipeline stages into your design. So to further improve performance, Platform Designer gives you the ability to insert pipeline registers in multiple locations inside the interconnect. As you may be aware, a pipeline register allows you to run a design at a faster frequency at the expense of an extra cycle of latency. So you can run the design faster, and this might help you close timing on a design. Okay, Platform Designer is usually pretty good on its own, but if you have a large, complicated system, you might need to add some pipelining to help improve the performance. So there are pipelines available that you can enable automatically in the system. These were enabled automatically with another option in the tool, or you can come in here and manually enable pipelines at certain specific locations in the interconnect. Okay. So I have a whole training that I'm actually updating right now about optimizing Platform Designer performance, and it includes discussion of of having these pipeline stages. So that's an important part of optimizing a large system design. Any questions coming in, Steve?
Yeah.
No,
excuse me, I have
there's oh yeah, please
somebody
go
on the
ahead.
yes, this is Jalal.
Hi.
Regarding platform designer maybe compatibility between different editions. So basically, I have a Max 10 board and the Cyclone 5 board, and I'm working with the Quartz free edition. However, when I try to design a Neos 5 with the platform designer, I'm following some of the tutorial on Intel website. It seems like the platform designer I have on the free edition is different than the one in the tutorial, which usually uses a standard or pro. I'm not really sure if there are some differences between platform designer in each edition, or maybe I'm following a tutorial from an older version. But
So
if I want to deploy this Neos 5 on one of these boards with platform designer, is there any compatibility or limitation, maybe?
so what version of Quartus you're using? That's a key question there.
23.
23.1, I presume.
Yeah.
Okay. So Neos 5 is supported in, I believe, in Light and Standard. I think 23.1 may have been the first version for Light and Standard where that was supported. Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But so did you say a Max 10 device, or did you say something older?
Yeah, I have Max 10, the T-Core board,
Okay.
and T0 Nano, DE0 Nano.
DE0 Nano for Cyclone 5.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm recalling correctly, yes, Neos 5 is supported. In the Lite edition, it might not be supported, though. You might need a license for Neos 5. I forget how the licensing works with Neos 5 with
On the
Lite and
self
Standard.
service.
What?
It's on the self-service licensing center.
Shreya, is that you?
Yes.
Hi. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah. The license for Neos 5, you can go to the self-service licensing center, and it's free of cost. Can you hear me okay,
Okay.
by the way?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's included with Standard, right?
You have to sign up for a license for every version, but
Oh,
the
okay.
IP is included. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you can use it in Lite without having it, without moving up to Standard, but you just still need to get a free license for it, is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
Any guideline maybe, or any a link for
Yes, I
maybe
can post it
getting
in the chat.
started, if you can share, please? Because I also find some example design in the website, but when I open some of them, I get an error message that this was generated for Pro, so it's not working on Lite. So I appreciate if you can have some, can share a link or any tutorial.
So if you have a link that's having an issue, if you put that in the chat so we can check that out too, that would be helpful for us so we can check that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Steve, anything else in the chat right now?
Yes, a couple more questions. Question
Okay.
was any option for Unix or Linux OS? And so I'm assuming, platform designer running on Linux. I'm assuming that's what the question's asking.
Oh yeah, I mean, Quartus is available for both Windows and Linux. So I forget what the current OS support is, what Linux OS is supported, but
Yeah,
I know
Ubuntu.
Ubuntu.
Yeah, Ubuntu. I think it's 20.04 is what officially, but I could be wrong. It is
Yeah.
listed on our website though.
Yeah, but absolutely, yeah, we have Windows and Linux versions of Quartus. So.
And another question, is there training that goes into depth of how the Avalon memory map works?
I am so glad somebody asked that question. Because yes, so I actually have our training website available. So this is our training website. And if I go into the catalog of e-learning here, and if I for standard interfaces, right there. So our platform designer standard interfaces training goes into detail on all of the standard interfaces that are supported in Platform Designer. So I go over Avalon, I go over AXI, I go over Avalon streaming, Avalon credit streaming, you name it, it's all covered in that training. And you get to listen to me for another hour. So that's a bonus for everybody, or maybe not. So, but yes, we do have training on detail on the standard interfaces if people are interested in that. So,
Right, that
other
wraps
questions
up
there?
that wraps up the questions we have currently in the chat window.
All right, thanks, Steve. All right, so yeah, so those were the 4 parts of the interconnect that I just wanted to highlight. And again, of course, if people have more questions on that, let me know. So again, I have extra slides just kind of to show off some new features and things. I'm not going to, go into detail on these. If you do want more detail, of course, you can ask me some questions here while we still have time. I think, how much time do we have left, Steve?
About 15 minutes.
Okay, all right. So, I don't know what happened there, but anyway, so there's a few relatively new features added last year into Platform Designer that can help you out in a number of different ways. The 2 main things that I'm going to highlight, time permitting, is the board-aware flow and subsystem packaging. And maybe I'll do subsystem packaging first because I already talked a little bit about the idea of hierarchical design. But subsystem packaging, the idea, like I said, is that Platform Designer makes it easy to build systems of systems. So you can build a system design and then reuse that system in another system design. And I gave the example earlier of a CPU subsystem. Now, previously, if you wanted to do this, you had to manage multiple files for it. It got a little complicated. So there was a main.qsys file for the subsystem, and there would be related files to that .qsys file. So in the Pro Edition, you know that we've got these .ip files. A .ip file represents the parameterization of each of the components in a system. Okay, so previously, if you wanted to reuse a system like this, you had to manage the .qsys and all of the associated files. Okay, but what subsystem packaging allows you to do is it basically smushes all of these files together into a single file with a .qcp extension. Okay, so a packaged subsystem is a system that has been packaged into a single file. So in that file, you've got the QSYS file, you've got the IP files, you've got any other additional files that you want to include, and there's also a script file. The script file allows you to customize the behavior of that package. So the idea is that you can create this package and use it for yourself or hand it off to other folks, and then they can just use the package without having to worry about configuration or anything inside the package. And it's just one file that they need to be aware of. Okay. So you can choose what components in the original system you want to include in the new .qcp file. Okay. And the use of QCP files is completely optional. So you can still see other .qsys files in your IP catalog and add them to your system the way that you could previously. So you don't have to use package subsystems. But using a single package subsystem file, a .qcp, is going to be really handy for file management, for revision control. You can put a .qcp file up in a corporate library for people to access. Lots of different ways that you can use this and have to worry about only a single file. There's a whole wizard in the IP catalog and Platform Designer, you just double click this and it walks you through what you need to be able to create the .qcp, and then the .qcp will just appear in your IP catalog. So this is what it looks like to create a package subsystem. So you give it a name and you select, so what it will show here is a mini view of your current system. So basically you choose which components should be included in your package subsystem. You can even choose which connections to include. So you could say, oh, I don't, in my package subsystem, I want to export this interface instead of using this connection so that somebody can use that exported interface. You could disconnect this and scroll over to the right here, it doesn't show it, but then export that interface so that a person could connect to that outside of the package, okay? So you can completely customize your package subsystem in any way based off of your current system.
Hey, Steve, there's a question that came in. Question is, what version of Quartus introduces the package subsystems?
I believe this was added last year in the Pro Edition 20, I want to say 23.3, I think. 23.2 or 23.3. So this is still a relatively new feature. Okay. Is that it? Anything else?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So you can choose what components you want to use, what connections you want to use. You can add additional files. So for example, if there is a custom component in the subsystem, you would want to include the code that makes up that custom component. And then there's also access to this subsystem script file that allows you to customize the use of this subsystem when it gets added to another system, okay? So the Platform Designer User Guide and App Note 1002, which is included, I believe, in the links that that Steve has that he'll put in the chat, gives you all the options and the syntax for working with the script. So when you add a package subsystem to your system, it looks like this. So here's our package subsystem, and it's a little hard to see, but there's a little zipper there. It's zipped up. Basically, a user cannot go in and make changes to that subsystem, okay? Now there is an option that can be enabled by the author of the subsystem to make the package unlockable. So if they have made it unlockable, a user could right-click this and select unlock, and then it becomes a standard subsystem that you could go in and drill into, and edit and customize yourself. But the main idea is that you have these, it's basically a black box, but if the user doesn't need to know what's in the black box, it makes it much easier for them to make use of it in their system design. Okay. So that is subsystem packaging in a nutshell. How are we doing on time and questions there, Steve?
No questions currently. We have about 8 minutes remaining in the hour. Oh,
Okay.
question just came in. Hang on just a second. Let's see. Do you have a tutorial or course in VHDL on how to create Platform Designer component to interface to custom logic?
Yeah.
So it sounds like, yeah, creating a custom component using HDL. In this case, it looks like the preference is VHDL.
Yes. So I don't remember if I put this in the links that I sent to Steve to put in the chat, but if I look for, let's see, custom IP creation. No, that is not it. Custom components. Here we go. So this is another one of my trainings, custom IP development using Avalon and AXI interfaces. So this walks through the use of the component editor in Platform Designer. So the component editor, which I can show off real quick here. If I want to create a new component here, the component editor is another little wizard. If you go into that, define the characteristics of your component, and then add the HDL files. So you add files that can be used for synthesis And if you want to use, excuse me, if you want to simulate the component, similar to what I was showing earlier with simulation, you can add Verilog or VHDL simulation files. And those files will be used as the simulation model files when the system is simulated. But for synthesis, you would put files up at the top here, specify which is the top level module, because you're basically building a small design here with a top level design. If there's any parameters that are found in the HDL code, such as you have a parameter that sets the bus width that a user could customize when they when they make use of this design, you can specify that you want to use that parameter and that somebody would be able to edit that parameter when they add your component to the system. And then finally, the signals and interfaces tab here, and unfortunately it's empty because I don't have one accessible right now. But once you add HDL code to the design of the custom component, the listing of all of the I/O interfaces will be included here, and you can organize them into the standard interfaces. So indicate what signals they are and what interfaces they make up: Avalon, AXI, is it a clock, is it a reset, etc. You set all that up on the signals and interfaces tab. And that online training that I just showed you goes through all the details of doing this. So it's again called custom IP development.
I did find the online training. I put that in the chat window. A couple more questions have come in.
Okay, let's have them.
First one. Let's see. Is there step-by-step instructions for using Eclipse on Cordis versions later than 18 on Windows 11? So talk about using Eclipse.
Using Eclipse for Neos?
Well, okay, so doesn't really specify there, but I'm going to gather using Eclipse for software development. Use that in conjunction with Cordis / Platform Designer. Okay, there we go. Yes, for Neos 2.
Okay, so for Neos 2, yeah, I mean we have training on that still, though of course we're recommending that new designs should be using Neos 5 and the new development suite instead of Eclipse. So yeah, I think there's a, what do we got in here, Neos? So yeah, there's a number of trainings here. So I'd recommend that they go to the Neos 2 to Neos 5 processor migration training instead of starting a new design with Neos 2. So that would be my recommendation. So.
Did we have trainings on utilizing Eclipse? I don't recall seeing trainings about Eclipse. Okay, so
hardware development and introduction to developing software is still here.
Okay. All right. Let's see. There is another question. Thank you, Steve. There's another question. We have used the standard version, and we usually create a hierarchical design using multiple QSys files. Currently, we also use the Pro version, and I've gotten the impression that standard version approach for developing hierarchical design is not the right one in the Pro version. Is that true?
No, it's the same basically. Like I was saying before, you can build systems of systems in Light, Standard, or Pro. The only difference is if you want to use these subsystem packages, which is currently a Pro-specific feature. But hierarchical system design is, you know, a QSys file can become part of another QSys file in any edition of Cordis of Platform Designer, Light, Standard, or Pro. Any other questions there?
Looks like he specified by saying 10 times 10x with his previous question about doing. Oh nope, looks like he was good there. Okay.
I mean,
no,
replicating. Yeah, I mean, you can add. You can, if it's talking about replicating, you can add the .qsys file as many times as you want. So.
Okay, there we go. Yep. Okay, I think that resolves his questions. There are no other questions. I'm going to start putting a couple more links. I've been putting links in the chat windows as you've been going on, and there's a couple more I want to put in there.
Survey in the chat too.
I'm gonna. Yep, that's one of the links. Please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, you know, everybody's talking AI these days, so I thought it's appropriate to bring it up here. Is there any plans for AI features in Cordis or Neos that you know of?
I am not the right person to ask for that. Shreya, who happens to be on the call, do you have any comment on that?
Sorry, I missed the question. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I was asking, everybody's talking AI these days. Do you know if there are any AI assist features being planned for Quartus or Neos?
Um,
Anything like that?
so we actually did a tiny ML demo at one of the conferences recently. So th those didn't use any AI specific features, but it's very early right now. I can't really comment much on it, but we may have plans to add the AI specific features. But you already can do the AI app. You can run your or port your TinyML applications to the existing Neos 5 cores without any of those the AI specific features.
Okay, thank you.
See,
Okay.
another question's coming in. Does Platform Designer show a block diagram of how the system is connected with port lists? Currently, what I see in your list view, the list view in your presentation. So block diagram with port lists.
With port lists.
Yeah.
So
So maybe not interface lists, but port lists.
So I could go to the hierarchy view here and look at the entire system. And this is all the exported interfaces, and I can turn on this is the block symbol tab, and I do show signals, and that shows all the individual signals. I don't know if that's what they're asking about.
I see. So my question is like, so right now you're just only seeing one block, right?
Well, this is the whole system. This is the top level system I'm showing right now.
Okay, so let's say like if I have like multiple modules and basically I use the platform designer to basically connect them up. So it will show me only the top one. Can I see like how like the inside of those sub modules, how they were connected? Like if I want to like just get an overview, like in your system view over here, it just shows these like connections. Like, I mean, I'm coming from like Xilinx tools kind of a thing. So they're like just used to it kind of a thing, seeing it that way.
So this is shown, like I showed earlier, this is the interconnect. Is that what you're talking about?
Okay, so that is
showing
just like, that is the only one that's like that's the only way I see it kind of a thing, all the modules connected.
These are all the internal components of the system. So I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to.
Okay, but doesn't show any details, right? Like if I have like, let's say 10 IOs in there and those 10 IOs, if they all might
Well,
not be going.
IO is outside of the system. So Platform Designer connects to anything that's exported out of the system that gets connected to IO pins that you can specify those IO pins. So this is all the exported interfaces, all the exported signals out of the system.
Okay.
So yeah.
I think you're.
So
I think he's asking for like a schematic view, I think, of the system.
So is that what you're looking for? Because there is a basic schematic view.
Okay.
There's not much to it, but is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
There's
Yep,
schematic
I get
view.
it now.
There you go.
Yep. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Steve, I think we're out of time, right? Or is there any other questions we want to do last minute here, or what's up?
Let's see. No questions in the chat, but it sounds like someone on audio would love to ask a last minute question.
One more last minute question. Go
quick
for it.
one. When will Neos 2 be removed from Platform Designer? Is there a plan for that? Or has that happened already?
Shreya, I think it's gone, right?
It has. Yeah, it's been removed from 24.1.
Okay, I'm still on 20.3.
All right.
Okay.
I think with that we can go
You
ahead
said
and
24.1?
Yes,
Neos 2 has been discontinued,
correct.
even in the standard edition Quartus as well.
It will be in 24.1 standard.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, you want to finish it up?
Yes. So everyone, thanks a bunch for all the great questions and comments that you supplied. I did put a whole bunch of links in the chat window. Hopefully you're able to go through that. Hopefully they were helpful. The very last link I put in there is the survey link. Thank you for attending. And like I said, we will get this posted on YouTube. Usually the turnaround time is pretty quick, usually within a day. At the latest, probably 2 days. And that's it. And so look forward to another Ask an Expert session in the near future.
Yes, thank you all for attending. Thank you all for the great questions. We look forward to hearing from you in another Ask an Expert session or in one of our training classes. So we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,